Ja, jetzt sind wir schon noch mal einen Vortrag weiter. Wir waren
we're going to go a step further. In the next presentation, we are going to talk about the practical implementation of the study. So we're going to be able to know a lot more results. Well, I think this has been prepared really well because we haven't revealed anything about the results so far. So it's quite exciting and thrilling. And therefore, it's a good idea that we finally get to know more about the final report. Dr. Hans Werner Voß is the author of the final report, and we invited him. Well, we are talking about the same thing. You find the final report in this book. So it was logical that we should ask the author what his ideas were. He is from the clinic research organization, Dr. Kottmann, and he has gathered all the information and the results in order to be able to write that final report. So let's look forward to the next speaker, Dr. Werner Voß. Let's welcome him.
Sehr verehrten Damen und Herren, mein Name ist Hans.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Hans Werner Voß. Such as I've just been introduced by the previous speaker, I'm the author of the final report about the study about which family Schussmann have already reported. I'm so glad to be able to be in front of you and be able to speak about the report, and that we don't produce anything, manufacture anything about pharmaceutical industry, so we sometimes don't know who is behind it. So I'm very glad that I'm in front of the camera, but I all miss you as an audience in a physical real meeting. But I hope that next year this will be possible, that there will be maybe a new study and we can repeat this event. Just to tell you shortly about myself, I have been working in the clinical research since 1985. I'm a physician and a biologist, and therefore I was maybe the right choice for the writing of the final report. In the time, I have already participated at clinical studies with homeopathical medications, but also with bioresonance. So I know the development and I see the differences between the orthodox medicine and the not already well-known or well-researched areas such as homeopathics and the resonance therapy. And such as Mr. Schussmann said about the ethical commission, the orthodox medicine is rather reluctant, but it's highly interested. If any companies suddenly decide that they would investigate their products in a constructive and repeated manner, because there are too few clinical studies and controlled studies with medical and resonance products. So it's a good idea that we can catch up and that we can say there are designs, there are possibilities to carry out such studies controlled and not only in an open procedure. And this is the transition to what I like to do today. In particular, I'd like to give you a report about the close to the practice reporting, and we will try to get a mathematical basis in order to create certainty. Such as Mr. Schussmann said, we are presently, because with our studies, we are in a very well-regulated world. In the pharmaceutical area, it is even more regulated, and the regulatory framework has also arrived on our side in the alternative medical products. So there is an ISO norm 14155 and an ethics commission, such as Mr. Schussmann told, had been contacted. So we wanted to make sure that all the licenses necessary and activities demanded were respected. So we didn't only carry out a study on its own behalf, but we wanted to make sure that an independent committee would review it, and so that we get a large consensus about what it should look like, such a study. Now, what is the content of this report? It is exactly what Mr. Schussmann has already been saying. We describe the study group, the test persons we have decided upon. We describe the methods we have used, and the mathematical results and the interpretation of the results. So this has already been reported upon. We concentrate ourselves in this study on the syndrome, shoulders, back, and spine and shoulders. So the so-called NDIs, and something you always have to have a look at in the studies. Does our product, does our device, does it have any side effects for the patients? So we have a look at the so-called safety endpoints under the headline adverse effects. The neck disability index has already been introduced by Mr. Schussmann, and here again a summary of what it's all about. It's very easy. It's about 10 questions about pain with 5 additional points about pain. 0 is no pain, 5 is a higher degree of pain, and the maximum points are 50. Everything below 8 point is a low symptom. Everything above 40 is extremely severe. And the authors of the score systems say that relevant clinical change can be observed from 8.4 points onwards only. Now, this is the slide on which I'd like to show you the summary of the whole procedure of the study. On the left-hand side, on blue, you see the individual points which we had to go through at the beginning of the study: the control, the check visit, the inclusion, integration of the patients, and then start of the treatment. It could be between 1 day and 3 weeks. Then we decided whether the patients were appropriate and could be treated with. And Mr. Schussmann told you about it. And then the patient would be transferred to the treatment modus, a 10 visit in 10 to 90 days, in order to carry out a medical history at the very end, once again, in order to see any changes because of the treatment. At the follow-up, it says 1 to 14 days. It means that the final visit to the clinic with a final evaluation of the medical doctor would take place on the first or up to 2 weeks after the end of the treatment. What is the regulatory framework? Something which I have already mentioned in the framework of the licensing procedure. We have a regulation about medical devices. So we are talking about the ISO standards 14155. And people who know about it, we know, that this is it's very similar to what refers to medication standards and regulations. We have an ethical commission. We did not need anyone from the federal safety authorities because we already had a CEC certified product which we were using. Now, what was the population of the test persons? A summary of what Mr. Schussmann already said. So which people were integrated? Male and female, at least 18 years old, and at least medium pain. Medium pain means at least a score of 5 on the visual analog scale for the neck, shoulder, and spine pains. It also means a minimum score of 15 on the neck disability index, and we also excluded any diseases which were systemic, degenerative, or inflammatory muscle diseases. And of course, a written agreement had to be signed. Now, the particular point of the studies was that we had a placebo-controlled, double-blinded, randomized study. So it meant that we had 4 devices available, 2 of which were offline and the other 2 were working. So the patient could be treated with the 4 devices without being able to recognize whether it was active or whether it was a placebo device. So it was a placebo-controlled design in the study. Now, what did our population look like? It was a random choice. We had 17 male and 37 female patients. What he thought was interesting, but it is, yes, it is interesting because it reflects reality. I've just just read a publication from according to some questionnaires in 2019 and 2020 in Germany, in the whole of the country. What about pain? What does it look like in the general population? And you see very clearly that our study is very relevant. Independent from the age groups, it becomes clear that above 60% of the questionnaires can complain about pains, and they are female. There is like a disbalance. In particular, when it comes to the neck pains, over 60% of the women complained about neck pain, but only 37% of the men. So there's a discrepancy between male and female patients, between men and women, and this is reflected in this study. Now, luckily, the study could be carried out rather quickly, and sometimes you need a long time to find patients, but obviously the need, but also the resonance of this study was rather fast and positive, so we could finalize the study after half a year. And it also shows that there is a huge interest among the populations for any of the possibilities, treatment possibilities going beyond orthodox medicine, and which can bring additional advantages. Another advantage of the study was that it was monocentrical, so it was only carried out at one clinic. So the whole procedure could be controlled. You didn't have to control that you have so many cooks in different clinics. So there was no problem in interpreting and the results and the implementation. Sometimes maybe it was difficult to organize the many visits of the patients in the clinic. So we had a protocol, and we had to sometimes expand the deadlines of the visits or the regulatory character of the visits to the clinic. There was a lot of theory, general theory, but now we're going to come to the core slide of the whole study. The main parameter was the changes of the NDI in the course of the treatment, and you can see here at the bottom, the difference between the two treatments was statistically significant. In the blue area, you can see a change of 42 to 38, which is only a small change. But on the right-hand side, at the real treatment, we have a change from 42 to 24. So there is a significant improvement of the pain symptoms when treated with a bioresonance, and no changes with the placebo. treatment. So this is something which you can also have a look at in a graphical manner, as you can see here. On the left-hand side, you see bioresonance, and on the right-hand side, you see the placebo in comparison in so-called Bosque-Whisker plots. Now, the size of these boxes, so the pink boxes before and the blue box afterwards, the size of the box can give you the distribution, and the T-shaped antennas show the highest values and the lower values. So here it becomes very clear there is a positive therapeutical effect under bioresonance, whereas on the right-hand side, under placebo, we have a further distribution, and it is around 0. And the black lines are medians. Now, in the presentation of Mr. Schussmann, it became another thing became really clear. Another endpoint was formulated, which was the short form 36. It's a questionnaire with 36 questions. And the SF36 is an internationally recognized questionnaire about the evaluation of living qualities. And there are 8 dimensions which you find in this questionnaire: bodily functions, ability, role functions, bodily pain, etc., etc. So this is also important for the reimbursement of medical treatment by the medical insurance company. I could show you 36 pictures and slides, but I'm not going to do that. But I have prepared some summary graphics, some slides about the 8 dimensions, which you can find as a signature below every picture. Here there is, additionally to what is written in the report, a red line. Now this red line is something when you ask people in the general population the score points, and you can see quite clearly the bodily function abilities. These people do have a pain, and they are limited and restricted, but you are below to what you find normally in the population. But because of bioresonance, we come back to the score. So which means that the patients have been transferred from a worse condition to normal condition of what is to be expected in a general population. The same thing applies also, and it couldn't be any different, the bodily pain, corporal pains, as you can see now in the middle. And at the beginning of the study, we were far below the expected values of the general population, but the treatment brings us back to the expected levels, whereas with placebo, nothing happens. Bodily role function is a difficult point because we don't know exactly what it means, but here we see the same effect. And you can realize when it comes to the size of the boxes that the patients don't exactly know what they should say. So there's a high variability, but it's the same statement. At the end of the therapy, they are better off than before. Then we have the same picture in the other points. Independently which parameter we look at, there is a significant improvement of the living quality among the patients. And this also applies to the area of the psychosomatic questions, the psychology and the mental functions. Now, what you could do, you could summarize these 8 functions. You have 36 questions in 8 dimensions, And I have talked about the 8 dimensions, but we could them put together into 2. On the one hand, the corporal bodily functions, on the other hand, the mental and psychological functions. So we can condense or summarize the whole thing, but it's clear what the result will be, because we already saw that in the individual questions, we have a significant improvement. And here, in particular, when it comes to the bodily, the corporal functions, we have a positive effect on the left-hand side in favor of bioresonance and no effect whatsoever on the placebo. So it's just by summarizing the individual function, this becomes much clearer. And when it comes to the psychological or mental functions, we see the same thing. We have a slight improvement, but here again, it's difficult to evaluate. But if we came back to the individual slides of the individual 8 dimensions, we could see a greater difference. A good point of comparison is the red line, which is the expectation of the general population. Here we can see a shift towards normality, and that's exactly what the patients expect. Now, the third point, which was mentioned by Mr. Schussmann, was this area VAS, Visual Analog Scaler. It's a great tool. You have a 100 millimeter interval on which you can add a smiley, well to 100. Fantastic. And the good thing about such a visual analog scales is the fact that it's like a figure. It's like an interpretation. You can add it up. It's not a scale from 1 to 5, but you have the interval, so you can really do maths with it. And here it becomes clear that the red line is the 0 line, no changes after the therapy in the placebo boxes. But under bioresonance, however, you see a significant improvement of the symptoms, or they would be reduced for all any of these pains, neck, shoulders, spine, back, whatever. In all areas, we clearly and definitely have an improvement. So it's a clear result, quite obvious. And at the end of a study, the patients will then be asked, what is your evaluation? What is your opinion? How do you evaluate the therapy? What is the output of the therapy for you in your mind? And a clear sign is that if the approach of the orthodox medicine can be complemented by our treatment, it can lead to the reduction of pain medication, because many patients would say that they didn't take any additional pain medication or have taken less than before. So we have a gray and a dark gray pillar, but then we have the black pillar, which is exactly the same medication as before, or I had to take even more. But there is no patient in this group who would have said that this were the case. The large majority in the placebo group, half of which had to take less and the other half had to take as much as before. So parallel to the visual pain interpretation about the outlook for the patients, we also have here bioresonance on the left-hand side and bioresonance on the right-hand side, placebo on the right-hand side. So it becomes clear pain is less, independently from the type of pain. But you can certainly have a look at it on the publication or in the slides. And it's not really surprising that this is the case. And the patients who are happy, who are satisfied, decide that they want to continue the therapy, or they even recommend the therapy to third parties. And here you can see on the left-hand side, the many patients would continue. You see the different colors in black, gray, and blue. No, none of the patients in the bioresonance group would have said that he would decline any further therapy. So the benefit, the advantages was clear and could be seen.
So you know the slide, Mr. Schussmann introduced it already, saying if I have a product, if I look into a product or a drug, I need to see if it has adverse events. So we are here on the safe side. In all, only 3 patients reported 10 adverse events, and in no case there was a relation with the use. So regarding this part, we are very safe. And Mr. Schussmann already showed it that since they were not many, I have listed the adverse events. So what we can expect, and we can even take some of them, pick them, for instance, tachycardia. Well, patients come in a clinical study, they come to a treatment and they are excited. Well, of course, this is something I would say immediately that it can appear. Or even this unrest in the stomach. It's this excitement before therapy. My favorite is the crying outburst. The patient was so happy that she couldn't believe it. It shows that the chief investigators has looked very thoroughly, and we've seen some points, but they show what we would anyway expect. So safety is no issue. Right. What can we say as a summary? Well, in the study with the NDI, the Neck Disability Index, we've had an internationally accepted parameter to evaluate the performance, which was significantly favorable to bioresonance. No adverse effects came up within the study. Life quality has improved significantly in all dimensions, and this was the output of the visual analog scale. If you enter the different pain areas, in all areas, you could state a pain relief. And all this, you can look it up in this beautiful booklet. And in the slides, I took some more effort to highlight the one or other point. I think that in the aftermath of this Congress, you'll get the presentations, so you can have a look at it in detail. So thank you very much. Well, Dr. Voß, thank you very much on our behalf. That you really managed to show these pictures in this final report, to give them a voice, and you added and explained very beautifully many things. I know many of our users read the report, but looking at the pictures is one thing, understanding what they say is not that simple. So thank you very, very much on our behalf, because we understood some highlights, some focuses, and this shows that somebody like you, how you really do your job, you really put all your energy into that, and we are absolutely happy that we're able to see that. So you are the only speaker who has never had to do anything in practical work with the bioresonance, according to Paul Schmidt. So that's a different perspective, yes? Well, as I said, I am known someone who is in the large areas of clinical research, and then what I said with Dr. Schussmann, in conventional medicine, patients don't feel very comfortable, and when we can show that there is alternative methods that help, then it's an important point. The problem, which I think I've said in my introduction, which have the non-conventional areas, is that not enough research is made. And we said that the new medical revised regulation perhaps can help a bit, that in the next years more research will be performed in medical products and bioresonance in order to give some advice to conventional doctors, saying that, well, the data were poor, used to be poor, but now they are improving. So this is an important contribution you're making. If I may add something to it, in your presentation, you have referred to the international standard of the study. And I, myself, on behalf of Reinex Medical, I can only say that after producing this highly qualitative study that also includes other countries, Russia, CIS countries, where it's very difficult to approve these medical products, at least as much as in Europe, they have referred to the study and said, hey, this is crazy, this is exactly what we need. And that's a three-step system, and the third step is the clinic, and most don't manage it. And we could produce this study, and we hope that this 3-year process will be get the approval for the Polaudan and the PS10 within the next month. So we have users who have been doing that for over 30 years, and they know how great it is. But the scientific evidence you have described right now, this was missing so far in this high quality, and this helps and confirms that existing users will be able to enter it. Well, I would say that the data in case descriptions, they are very good. There are thousands of case descriptions where it works, but this is random. This is controlled clinical research. And with this, you can convince the conventional doctors, because that's the evidence to be produced. When I can say something, Dr. Voß, you definitely have managed that. I'm again so fascinated of the study that I really would like to start the next one. Of course, there are certain obstacles to it, monetary obstacles, because these studies are very expensive. Well, that's the problem. But on the other side, you have also patient safety to be assured. Patient safety is only possible through controlled research. We see that on another stage, how important it is to produce solid clinical evidence. Of course, I'm not only managing director, but also the safety officer for medical products, and it's good to know that we can produce such a study, because you say safety, that's a very important issue. How many patients are asking, can it harm me, or do I have to expect something negative? And this is something you can beautifully deny here, and it gets me some better sleep, definitely. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Voß. We come to the questions. I'd like to know if there are some questions on that. So how far are we? So please, show them. So first question, how often are studies performed for alternative medical procedure at the level of this HWS studies? Well, I can't give you figures, but in any case, it's few. There is a handful of publications of this subject and some reviews, but there are usually very, very few studies performed, because it's difficult to perform controlled studies. If you go a step to the left or to the right, take acupuncture. If you take placebo-controlled acupuncture study, that's a problem. If you want to have a study with a device, you somehow need to generate the application that the device works. In this case, it was relatively easy, so it was feasible to have this placebo-controlled screen study, but it's not easy to generate in any case, so it's difficult or even impossible to perform controlled studies within this segment of alternative therapies and medical products. Well, do I have another question? You described in the presentation that in head, shoulder, and back pains, improvements were to be observed. At what pain indication, apart from the cervical spine syndrome, showed the best effect with bioresonance? Well, I'm just looking at my slides in order not to need to check it up in detail, but basically, we see everywhere the same output, and I don't have the figures in mind, but the pain reduction was in all areas clear. Regarding the picture I have, I would say that independently from the pain type of the same sort, but you can check the details in the report. There is a table with different scores for all parameters. Well, I think the question shows that they are all of them, they are well into the subject. Okay, we come to a third question. Could you imagine to use the bioresonance according to Paul Schmidt regarding its effectiveness with patients with renal insufficiency, to have it checked in the study? Well, I think they heard the question somewhere. Well, you can imagine anything. We perform clinical studies because we don't know if anything works or does not work. This is our driver. And in this respect, if out of the case descriptions that definitely exist on these indications, if these case descriptions allow to derive some likeliness that this makes sense, then I would do it. Well, that sounds good. Now I have a personal question to you. Well, how do you feel that contact with bioresonance according to Paul Schmidt, since you had no contact, and if you were no medical chief investigator, what is an approach to you? Is this something interesting to you? Well, of course. As I said at the beginning, I'm a biologist and a physicist. Well, I am interested in this area, but of course, due to my job, which to 99% is derived by conventional medicine, I wouldn't say I am biased, but I have a certain idea of how a therapy has to look like. But I've performed so many different studies that show that there is no black or white, but in fact there are many grade shades. So at one patient, and we've seen it also previously, we discussed it with the doctors, how alternative procedures can help. There is not the panacea, and definitely I am interested in getting to know alternatives. And if somebody like you says, okay, we are convinced of this idea of our device, and we have it checked, and it shows that it works, well, I will be the last person saying that's nonsense. It makes extremely sense, because only like this you make progress. That is, when you want to bring forward medicine, then you need to accept other ways, and they show that they need to be walked, that is checked. So from that perspective, you are a lot at the desk before the computer with cervical spine syndrome. Well, definitely, but I am taking some rest, so I have some helper telling me time to get up. Well, that helps as well, because that's prevention, you know, definitely.